Hello, this is Mark Abell. Today we're going to be discussing the Battle of Little Bighorn from the perspective of both the Indians, otherwise known as the indigenous, but also from the perspective of General Custer, which is the perspective of the federal government or the U.S. government. So we're gonna make you out to be junior historians. Historians are people, they interpret evidence in the form of documents and pictures and movies and articles, and those are called primary sources. So our first primary source here is a painting from Kicking Bear. It was made in 1898. And let me know, what is it that you see in this picture? What are the people doing? How would you describe the people in the picture? Do you see them as victorious, brave, angry, strong? And now we're going to move on to our next image. So here we have the National Cemetery where Custer and many of the members of his army were buried. It's out in Montana. And that is the site where he fought both Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull, which were the chiefs of various Indian tribes. And a fun fact is that before the Civil War, soldiers were buried where they died in battle, but this changes after the Civil War, and the remains of these soldiers were brought to either private or national cemeteries. The national cemeteries would have been a government-run cemetery, and the private cemetery would have been a non-government-run cemetery. So this is perhaps my favorite primary source, and as you look at it, it was actually put out by the makers of Budweiser today, Anheuser-Busch Brewing Association, and Lesh, the author of our textbook, talked about how at the national park in Montana, the American or perspective of Custer, that is the perspective that is celebrated. He said that there's children's lunch boxes, there's board games, there's movies, there's TV shows, there's toys, and they show him as a hero, and they view him as someone willing to destroy the quote-unquote savage Indians. Now I want to do a little scaffolding for you all. The word venerate means honor, so or to respect or to value something. So my question for you all is, why does American culture so venerate Custer? He did, yes, he died in battle, but in the course of his death, he made some poor military strategies. And how do you compare what you saw in the Budweiser advertisement with the American perspective with the painting that Kicking Bear made? So now we see that Custer had said that there are not enough Indians in the world to defeat the 7th Cavalry. So, from what you've read, from what you've seen in the movies, what is strange, suspect, or wrong about Custer's statement? So now we have a quote from Crazy Horse. Crazy Horse was one of the tribal leaders that participated in the Battle of Little Bighorn. And he says, "We did not ask white men to come here. The Great Spirit gave us this country as a home. You had yours. We did not interfere with you. We do not want your civilization." What is his perspective about the land? Why does he want to defend what he believes to be his land? What does he wish to defend the land from? Now, I bring in a contemporary author. He's an environmentalist, he's an activist. He wrote a very popular New York Times best-selling book. It's called The Omnivore's Dilemma. I wanted to show you all that it's important to know history because history helps to inform. Inform just means to describe or help us to make sense of the present. So we have Michael Pollan. He's mentioning the Battle of Little Bighorn. He says, but the Western mind can't bear an opt-out option. We're going to have to refight the Battle of Little Bighorn to preserve the right to opt out. Or your grandchildren and mine will have no choice but to eat amalgamated, irradiated, genetically prostituted, bar-coded, adulterated, fecal spam from the centralized processing conglomerate. Why does Michael Pollan use the example of the Battle of Little Bighorn when he's discussing issues of food production? Why does he do this? What attitude did the indigenous, have that would make him say this? So, the takeaway today is that the indigenous, had a perspective where they believed that the land that they lived on was given to them from the Great Spirit, which is their form of creator or God, whereas General Custer and the federal government, they have the perspective that the Indians should not occupy the land because European American whites need to settle and develop the land, and you have the Homestead Acts where 160 acres of land are given to the settlers, immigrants that have come to the United States. You have some Scandinavians, people from places like Finland, people from places like Norway and Denmark. These Scandinavian people, they settle the land. And David McCullough wrote a book called about pioneers recently. He is also an acclaimed author who did 1776, which I believe won a Pulitzer. And so we have a clash of two cultures. The white American settlers believe they're bringing civilization. Civilization is thought to be something positive and necessary. And the indigenous or Indians believe that the land needs to be protected and that the indigenous lifeways, that is their way of doing their lifestyles or their ancestral customs, must be preserved. And I'm going to have you do a quick write, pros of white settlement and cons of white settlement. The cons of white settlement will basically be talking points that the Indians would use, and the pros of settlement will be talking points that the Americans or white settlers would use. And as we evaluate these perspectives, it helps us to think like historians. And I thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to reading your writing.